Bria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's so great to be here.
I love talking to other women who are also passionate about helping and supporting other women. So thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, I feel the same way about you. Thank you. It's so nice, and it's nice to have more conversations about it, isn't it? Because I think, as we've also discussed, it's not talked about enough.
Yes. So how did you get started in the industry? I understand you started as a personal trainer.
Yeah. So when I have two kids who are now 11 and 14, and after my second one was born, I knew I wanted to do something that I could build around them. And of course, as the story goes, I was trying to kind of heading back into finding myself. And that's what, I sort of rediscovered myself, my grit, the hobby for my and time for myself when he was a baby, through health and fitness. And that's what, launched me into personal training and health coaching specifically, and nutrition coaching, I would say. And that's where I stayed online for a good, well, almost a decade until things shifted.
Until things shifted, what happened?
Yeah, great. Thank you. I led you into that one. So around the time when I was 35, I noticed in my clients, a lot of response rate of all of a sudden the things that had been working for them, the fitness that had been working, the way, the portion control that maybe we'd been talking about had been working, stopped working. And it stopped working, I think, in their minds for a few reasons. One, they just started to feel really fatigued or really tired and just couldn't seem to push themselves through these workouts, found it too challenging to wake up to kind of create that hustle again in the morning where it's like just wake up and go, or they were really requiring a lot of caffeine to do so. And then they were starting to struggle with a lot of cravings. So it wasn't that they weren't capable of doing of following these programs that had once worked for them, but it became really challenging and at a cost where they felt really exhausted throughout the day. And that really gave me a lot of pause. I found it concerning as a trainer and a coach where what was once working was no longer working. And about 2 years after I started hearing that more from my clients, the same thing started happening to me. And so that's when I say what shifted for me. I hit a point probably around when I was 37 where I really noticed this kind of low grade exhaustion. And for me, who had built my career in the fitness industry, it was concerning to feel like I couldn't make it through a day without taking a nap or falling asleep, at about 7:30 on the couch. I was having my own crazy sugar cravings. I was really starting to feel low. And what kind of tipped the scales for me is I started noticing some real irregularities in my period, which I had always been very regular in. And I started to notice some irregularities in my sleep. And that sleep had always been like my superpower. And when that started to go, I just thought something's not right. I mean, and of course, as the story goes for a lot of us women, there were a slew of other things that kind of piled on. My clothes started fitting more tightly and I just digestively wasn't feeling very well and my skin started responding differently. But it was the sleep piece that really pushed me to take a trip to see my healthcare provider. And I just knew something wasn't right. I wasn't getting quite the solution at that point. So I ended up going to my naturopath over here. And I think it was learning a little bit more about the female hormones and knowing that I just couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't teach other women to do this when it wasn't working for them. I couldn't, follow it in myself anymore, and something had to change. And that's what really set me down a path of education to learn more about, women, particularly in these 35 to 55 perimenopause years.
And fatigue definitely is the number one complaint in this stage of life. And it
It
makes so
is.
much sense. Like, especially in your case, you've got two young kids at home.
Yeah.
You're not sleeping well. That
No.
doesn't sound like somebody who's going to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and get on with their day. You're
Yeah.
dragging yourself out of bed. And we know that there are so many roadblocks to
Mhm.
weight loss. And adrenal fatigue is definitely one of the big ones.
Yeah. But it doesn't, we aren't really educated in that, are we? The wellness industry really promotes this, move more, eat less mentality. When I think for me, as we shift into these years, I think what's most important is really that nourishing of the adrenals.
I 100% agree. And we do find that that is one of the major roadblocks. And for women coming to see me, if that is something that I believe is happening for them, I will discourage them from actively trying to lose weight for 3 to
Yeah,
6 months because we need to get on top of their adrenal health beforehand. But there's so many other roadblocks that we find at this
oh,
stage. It can be
you're right.
mitochondrial function,
Mm.
insulin resistance.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yes.
that's a massive one, and that's when I would look at testing. And if insulin is not in the ideal range, it's like you're not going to lose weight. This is
No.
locking the door to fat loss.
Yes.
And we need to open
Absolutely.
that up before you're gonna have any chance, otherwise you're banging your head against the wall.
And it impacts us on a much more deeper emotional level too. It's not just we can start to feel like, oh, I'm the failure. Like I'm not dedicated enough. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not good enough to follow through. So it impacts us as women on a deeper emotional level in our confidence when we're hitting these roadblocks and we don't even know that that's what they are.
Yeah. I really think that if you're on a program, you should feel better. If you
Yeah.
don't have more energy, if you're not seeing the weight come off, if you don't just wake up with that bit of buzz, that greater vitality, it's not working for you. You're not nourishing yourself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And to speak to what you just said, when you encourage people to almost shift out of this weight loss mindset for 3 to 6 months, I really agree. Because I come from the personal training industry and the fitness industry, a lot of my clients are avid fitness junkies, I would say. And it's a hard sell, but I often have to really encourage them to stay out of the gym unless it's for a yoga, or a walking or something that really brings them joy once or twice a week, to stay right out of the gym for at least 4 to 6 weeks. Same thing.
Thank you for
Because
clarifying that because it's not no exercise. It's just
yes, it's
gentle, calm,
yes, yes,
relaxing, nurturing.
yes. I like to say to women, we need to move our bodies every day. I mean, we don't work on the farm anymore. So, we're all very sedentary, or even whether you're standing or sitting all day, it's still a very sedentary and movement on our body. And our body still builds up its own stress. But movement is critical, and that's a key part of our health. So making sure you're moving every day in an expansive, relaxing way, like a walk or a yoga, as we were saying, or something along those lines, is not the same as fitness, which I actually think of as almost more of a luxury, a luxury or joy pillar. It's really not required for us to be healthy or to lose weight, because we can, as long as we move, we can get there. And you know so I think when women understand, like, okay, this should really be something, as you say, that's bringing you energy or making you happier, and if it is not doing those things, then it's time to kind of put them on the side until you can get back to that point in your life.
Are there any other roadblocks that you've discovered?
To weight loss or to
Mm,
energy, is that what you mean?
yeah,
I
to
mean,
weight loss. Yeah.
yeah, yes, absolutely. I think some of the biggest ones for women, well, there's a few. I definitely think a lack of productive rest is a big one for most women. Even just recognizing that what you talked about, you touched on the fact that in my life, I was, raising 2 young kids and building a career. So it's a busy time in our life. And on top of that, I think because we're having children a bit older, we're often in this sandwich generation of, we have aging parents and young kids, and we're building these crescendoing careers at this point in time. But we're also, more inundated with stress in a lot of other areas, like blue light and social media and marketing, in just a very different way than maybe, our parents were exposed to. Not to say it's better or worse, but it's a new challenge for our bodies. And it feels to me very much like we're asking these Olympic levels of output of our body as women and men, but I'm going to talk about women here, without providing, the massage therapists and the off days and the cross training that an Olympian would get in order to perform at those levels. So that real focus on productive rest, where you just do nothing, where you just maybe turn inwards a little, where you just go for a walk and smell the roses, where you just happily stay very present, is something that I think is really missing. And again, like you were saying with sleep, if we're not getting at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep, then an active workout style or an active calorie deficit can be really hard on the body and resist that weight loss.
Mm. Sleep deprivation definitely does increase sugar cravings the next day,
Yes,
so that it is just
absolutely.
that vicious cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard because your body just is searching for that energy in one way or another, and nobody's napping these days, so it needs to find the body. The other thing I would say that I run it that I think is really important for women is really this mindset piece around the permission to prioritize oneself. That real permission to, again, to say, hey, I'm not feeling like myself, something's not right, and it's really time for me to say no to other things and say yes to myself, because a happier, healthier me means I can provide more to the people I care about.
I love that. Fill your cup first.
Yes,
So then
yes,
when
fill
it
your cup.
overflows, you can then help others fill theirs. I love that.
Yes. I was I had read a book recently that talked about rupturing, and I think it's a really powerful thing that for women to understand is, I love this fill your cup metaphor. I think it is so relevant and so important. However, we also want to make sure that our cup isn't full of sludge. So if you're living life and you're feeling a bit anxious or overwhelmed at all times, sometimes we do need that conscious rupturing. And for some women, that might look like dancing with friends. For some, it might be screaming in the shower or singing loud in your car. It's an opportunity for you to kind of release the old so that you can create space for the positive and the new coming in.
And there's so many ways. Like you mentioned a few, but I just think of a
Mm,
time in my life where I was highly stressed. And I used to go to
yeah.
the driving range after work and write people's names on the balls. Whoever was annoying me, pop the ball
Get
down
out.
and smash it as hard as I could, which really wasn't that hard. I'm not a good
Yeah.
golfer, but just a trip to the driving range and just getting that aggression out of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if that's not your jam, like a massage, I am always shocked at how, if I haven't had a massage in months and maybe it's been a very stressful time, if it's been a particularly stressful time, I'm always amazed at how the release that happens, even an emotional release, when someone is in there doing body work on you. So there's uh there's a lot of ways to rupture.
I agree.
Yeah.
So with exercise, you've
Yeah.
mentioned that you like more gentler exercises like yoga and walking at this stage of life.
Yes.
What do you do with weight bearing? Because although you said to leave the gym, we also need the gym when we're looking at our bone strength, our muscle strength. How do you incorporate that all together, or what do you recommend?
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, first, I do think it's important to recognize that like yoga has many levels. So if you do fall in love with yoga in your process of relaxing or healing, I would say, your body. And again, we know we're healed when our body is, or we're in a healing state, when our body is releasing weight without fitness. I think when we are able to release it, when we're sleeping well through the night, when we have consistent energy throughout the day, that's a great point when you think, okay, it's time for me to level up, because load bearing or any type of high level fitness, a high intensity interval training, anything that hits that anaerobic level by nature is actively stressing the body out. That's its whole role. So that it changes. When we get stressed, we adapt. And so when we're in this position where, we finally find ourselves feeling consistently able to get through a day and we want to add those levels on, that's a perfect time to start reinvigorating and re-adding in a load bearing exercise. So for me, I always think of, 2 to 3 times a week of a total body workout, whether it's an upper body focus and then a lower body and then a total body. And you can do that with or without weights. Again, lots of yoga has a much more intensive, holding up of the body. So you're still working those muscles. It's just a different way. And you want to just choose the way that, again, is bringing you joy and makes you feel good in your body, because it really is different for everyone, isn't it?
Definitely is. What about stretching? I'm a big advocate of women need to have some sort of stretching component in their routine.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that. And I love that you brought it up, because I think it is, again, if we look at our bodies, particularly in these years, as you know, really our goal is to kind of nourish the adrenals. We have to remember that, again, energy also gets caught up in our bodies. So whether we're just sitting all day in a car, or standing at the front of a classroom, or in an office, a clinical office, or whatever it is that your career takes you to do, the body starts to hold on to the energy that it's stuck in. So stretching creates that real release and rotation, release of cortisol in the actual muscles, but also just the expansion of the body, and creates more energy flow throughout it. So I 100% agree with you. I think that a 10-minute stretching should be a no matter what in a day. It's a very mindfulness practice. And as you taught me when we spoke before about how the impact of conscious breathing every single day on our hormones is so significant. So I encourage, for me, when I'm healing, when I'm going through a healing process, I always make sure to walk for about 30 minutes every day and do about a 10-minute stretch. And I might do that stretch at night if I'm struggling with winding down, or if I have tension in my actual body. I know I have a lot of clients that as we've gotten older, we don't sleep as well because of discomfort in our actual joints and body. And we just need to release that. Sometimes that is the simplest thing that can release it. But sometimes the right thing is in the middle of the day when you're feeling stiff and stuck. I think the real journey for women at this age is learning to kind of turn in and really take notice of how our body is feeling, because we've really been raised to look outside of us, to think about what our body should look like and what it should act like and how it should be. So when we turn in, we start to find those answers, and we can respond in the relationship that I hope to have with a body.
I think that's part of your whole philosophy, isn't it? As the period whisperer, as somebody that
Yes.
teaches women to listen to their body, because the body's always talking to you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, really, even our menstrual cycle alone, if you are still in that cycle, like that alone is a real great indicator of what's going on. When you have a pretty normal rhythm, a pretty normal bleed, that's a great indicator of what your health is. But when it starts to go off a little bit, or we have these significant PMS symptoms, it's just a notice, really, or a flag from your body that something has gone awry. And these are the things that I think women, when we start to recognize, like indigestion or digestive issues, or even just joint swelling or pain, these are the things that I think should be the red flags that remind you to go to your naturopath, like Jennifer, and start to dig into the issue before it becomes a bigger problem.
So, one of the signs that I look for, if a woman is still menstruating and she's having sugar cravings leading up to her
Mm-hmm.
periods, this is a
Mm-hmm.
big sign of adrenal dysfunction, that she is
Mm-hmm.
wearing her adrenals out, that stress has become a bigger part of her
Yeah.
life than ideal. And we all have stress. So what would be some
Mm.
of your favorite stress management techniques?
I love this. So one of the biggest things I always recommend is, and particularly in that phase of our cycle, as you know, most women don't even understand, because we're not taught this. Most women don't realize that our metabolism picks up so much in that phase leading up to our bleed, that we burn 250 to 350 calories more per day. So there we are again, taxing those adrenals, as you're saying. So
But
for
it's
me,
also
as
why
I
women,
head,
sorry, I was going to say it's that is why women feel hungrier leading up to a period.
yes,
And they might not have
yes, and you should
recognized
eat.
that I'm starving. Why am I hungry? Why am I craving? Why is all of
Yeah.
this going on? It's because your metabolism has picked up a notch. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Keep
Yes.
going.
No, I'm glad you said that, because that is fully what I meant to be more descriptive on. It's just that is a time where the body needs more, and if we don't give it, we will feel the imbalance of that in fatigue, in extreme sugar cravings, and our adrenals will take the brunt of it. So we don't I always remind people, we don't get something for nothing in this life, right? There's always the law of physics, what goes up must come down. So So for me, some of the things that I do every day, one is I do not drink caffeine on an empty stomach ever. For me, I've really cut way back on my caffeine, if at all. And I find it used to be, before I understood this about our bodies, it was a normal thing to wake up and have a coffee or have even a pre-workout before I worked out if I was in that phase. And that alone, because we're already, taxed, that alone just always robbed me of energy later in the day. So instead of that, I'm quite happy to start my day with like a greens juice, a nice organic greens that has all the micronutrients in it. I'm sure you have one that you might recommend. I've been since enjoying my electrolytes after some great advice from you. That was an
So tell
amazing
me
piece
what
of
difference you noticed with electrolytes.
I'm more consistent energy throughout the day. So even though I have got to a place in my life where I'm pretty good at nourishing my energy and knowing when it's dipping, I'll still notice maybe some ebbs and flows. And with the electrolytes, I really noticed a real consistent piece. I didn't have any of those kind of midday or mid-morning dips. Is that what you've noticed, or what do you hear from other people?
Anything from less brain fog, better
Mm-hmm.
energy,
Yeah.
less palpitations, less sweating, better
Mm,
sleep. Like, it's a big long list, and every woman will
yeah.
experience different benefits. But if you haven't done
Yeah.
it, I highly recommend finding a clean, so color free, preservative free, flavor free
Mm-hmm.
electrolyte concentrate, and just take a dose a
Mm-hmm.
day for a week. So how soon did you
Mm-hmm.
notice your difference, Bria? Would you say it took a couple of days, it was closer to a week, it was 2 weeks?
Uh, oh no, just a couple of days.
Yeah.
Absolutely, just a couple of days. And I got the exact one that you and I had talked about, the colorless and everything. And it
Yeah.
was, it was fascinating. It was fascinating as well for me because I live in the desert, so I know that dehydration can be a real issue. So I had thought I was on top of that hydration, and you don't realize how just that simple electrolyte. And actually, now that you come to think of it, I have had a much better sleeping last few weeks, so that would be something that improved significantly for me as well.
Mm.
What a great
When
challenge.
when I was struggling with anemia, I would get
Mm-hmm.
palpitations from my anemia, and a dose of
Oh, geez.
electrolytes, wait anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes, and my palpitations would stop. So
Oh
it's
my
just
goodness.
amazing, just the degree of health benefits that you can experience
Yeah.
with electrolytes.
Yeah.
But we've gone
I'm
off on a
jealous.
tangent because it's my passion. If you want to talk
I know. Sorry.
electrolytes, I'm there. But we were talking about your routine and what you do. So you said that you start with
Yes.
greens. I just want to put a thing
Yes.
in there that there are a certain amount of the population that have oxalate issues, and the
Yes.
oxalic acid in greens may cause problems for some individual. So if you are having a green drink and you notice there's
Hmm.
more inflammation in your body, if you notice there's more fluid retention, if you notice there's more joint pain, then
Hmm.
you may have an issue with oxalates. But that is a small portion of the population.
That's good to know, though, and thank you for saying that. So I find that really beneficial because one, I think it's getting a significant amount of hydration in. I'll have mine a good 16 ounces of water first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And for some people, if greens aren't the right thing for you, just a really big glass of water in the morning. It probably follows right along lines with the electrolytes, maybe even squeezing half a lemon in it and just really rehydrating. I mean, we're practically cucumbers at 60%, you know, water as humans. And so if we've spent 7 to 9 hours in a bed, then we haven't typically been drinking very much. And that alone is such a good way to kind of rehydrate and start the day. But the greens, particularly for me, help, I think, regulate out any excess cortisol and sort of nourish those adrenals as a good start and create a really good gut base, I would call, for the day. So I find this difference is not only my energy throughout the day, but significantly different in those afternoon cravings that can hit so many of us. So if you are struggling with that, that's a big one. And I noticed the difference in it within about 3 or 4 days. So it's a regular part of my routine. But the other thing I find that I like to do every day, so along with my greens, is getting out for a walk. I do have a dog, so I will typically walk him, but I would walk alone. Like if I go on vacation, I will walk alone. And I like to spend half the walk just breathing and existing out in nature, and half the walk listening to something that reminds me of what I'm really needing in life at that time. So if you are someone who's struggling with that real permission to prioritize yourself, that real permission that your health is, you know, equally as important as maybe the lunches, the perfect little bento box lunches for your children, for example. It's a really great place to start, whether it's in a podcast like Jennifer's podcast, or whether it's a book that just interests you around health or female empowerment, whatever it might be. I find it kind of those three pieces, that walk, the greens, and the mindset piece, sort of hits the mind, body, soul all at once in a really great daily habit.
Do you do any sort of journaling?
That's a great question. I don't, when I was younger, I was a big journaler.
Mm.
I find now, because I do a lot of writing, I think for social media marketing and for helping women in blogging, I find that a lot of my creativity comes out and goes there, or, video
Mm.
stories and videos. So I don't do it as often, but I think that's because I have the opportunity to put the creative outlet here. However, that being said, if I am struggling and grappling with something, I find that meditation time, or even a writing meditation where you meditate for a little while and then you get into journaling right after, that's my favorite way to journal.
Okay.
Do you
I've
journal?
just found I've just found for many women who are finding that their health's not exactly where they'd like it to be, to
Hmm.
start some sort of journaling process. Say, for example, it might be at the end of their day where they might go, okay, well, today my health, maybe I've had a headache, or maybe I felt slightly constipated, just so that they can try and
Yes.
draw out how they're feeling. And then to also think about, well, what have I done today? Did
Yeah.
I have my glass of water in the morning? Did I go for a walk? What have I done differently today that made today? So if
Oh,
it was a
I
good
love.
day, what have I done to make
Yeah.
today great? So I can replicate that and do it again tomorrow. And sometimes we
Yes.
find patterns within our week. So you might not
Mm,
realize it, but for some people find Monday the most stressful day of the week. Other people find
mm,
Saturday the most stressful day.
yes.
It all
Yeah.
depends on what is going on in your life. And you might notice this pattern. I have a headache every Monday. Well, okay, what is it
Yeah.
that happens on Monday that is triggering you? And it's the same
Yes.
with your lifestyle, whether you might notice at certain meals, like maybe every Wednesday we have a family meal and maybe we go to a certain restaurant and I always feel sick on Thursday. So that what have
Yeah.
you done? So just you can try and put the pieces of the puzzle together. But I also recommend gratitude. So just finding things that
Hmm.
you're grateful for, it could be the weather, it could be a friendship, it could be a friend,
Hmm.
like a phone call. There's so many things that you can
Yes.
be grateful for.
I love that very, I think you explained it in a way that I wasn't thinking. Because I'm an avid tracker of my cycle, that is often where I log a lot of these things that so I am a huge fan of that. And I do find every day I like to have that review of, how, and that real, as you say, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. How am I feeling in my body? So a lot of us, what we don't realize, like you said, what we ate 2 days ago might actually impact. Like for me, I often find it's a 2 or 3 day cycle before I feel what had happened. It's not always right away, immediately, or even what happened that day. It's so you're right. Tracking or journaling that way can be such a powerful way. And I agree with you on the gratitude, and even to add another layer to that, I think pleasure is another piece of the puzzle that so often we have missed out on. We don't spend time prioritizing pleasure in our life, and that looks different obviously for everybody and what brings them pleasure. But I always like to try to push my clients to find pleasure outside of their children, outside of their careers, and even outside of their relationship, that is pleasure just for them every day. And it can be a small thing. It can just be reading a book that maybe they really liked, or listening to a song that they liked. But that daily tracking of the pleasure, much like gratitude, helps kind of align us to something that I think nourishes our soul.
Well, while we're talking about nourishing the soul, and considering the time of year this podcast is going to come out,
Mm.
something that I
Hmm.
do annually is I reassess my 100 dreams list. So I have 100, like I have an exercise called 100 Dreams, in which I go
Mm-hmm.
through and I think about, what do I actually want to achieve in my life? Think of it like a bucket list. So it might be
Mm-hmm.
places I want to go, skills I want to learn, people I want to catch up with, can be anything. And to sit down and get to 20, you get there pretty quickly. But to push past and to actually stretch yourself to think of 100 different things that you want to do, you're not going to do it in one sitting. And because it's something I do every year, I start with last year's list. And I cross
Wow.
things off that I've achieved. Some things are no longer relevant. Some new things have come to my attention that I add to the
Mm-hmm.
list. So I reflect on this so I can see what's going to bring me joy. What do I want to achieve or accomplish? So that I can start looking at next year and going, right, what can I add to my calendar? It could be a qualification that you want. Maybe you need to
Mm-hmm.
start looking into options. Um, One of the skills on my list is actually learning to chop like a chef. I would love to have those cutting skills. So then, like you're out there looking for, is there any classes in the community that I can attend? So we've gone off topic, but I just
No, but I love that. I think you're right. It's very relevant to this time of the year. And I actually, what I think, what I hope the listeners understand is that it's our body, as we know, the mind body connection is so significant. So if we're dealing with stress and adrenal burnout, to try to bring it back to what we were talking about, if we know that particularly this time in our lives and in our bodies, that we want to nourish those in order to have optimal energy and weight release, if that's what you're struggling with, then making sure that we are aware of the things that are stressing us out, and really addressing those things. Because even simple, I know simple research shows that if we're eating in a stressed out time in our life, if that's where our body is physically feeling stressed, it will naturally move it into a suppressed metabolism and a higher fat storage. And that's not what a lot of us want to hear, especially if we're just dining on salads and chicken all the time. So we want to really bring our minds and our life into a place of, well, a lot in the holistic industry, we talk about primary food, which is all the things that fulfill us and fuel us that aren't on our plate. So I love this 100 Dreams list because I think it gives us a platform, or a tool even you've just given us, to kind of reignite our own joy and primary food, whether it's spiritually or whether it's skillfully or whether it's in a relationship or whatever it is, so that we can bring more joy and pleasure to our life. And when we do that, we naturally reduce the stress in the body in a very effortless way, I would say, or fun way.
I really believe how you eat
Mm-hmm.
is so important. And that's just what
Mm-hmm.
you've spoken about. But it's also whether you
Mm-hmm.
sit to eat versus stand to
Mm-hmm.
eat.
Yeah.
Whether you've got beautiful, maybe classical music on in the background, or a genre of music you enjoy
Mm-hmm.
while you eat versus the news. These
Yes.
are all very important factors to consider. So what you're eating does play a role, but
Mm-hmm.
many women focus on that solely. You've also got to think of when you're eating, how you're
Yeah.
eating, and who you're eating with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And what you're doing, are you trying to multitask while you're eating? Like, eating requires digestion. It requires its own, element of effort for the body. And if the body is already struggling to rebalance your hormones, struggling with adrenal burnout, you're taxing it with another job. So we want to do it
Mm.
in a way that is focused and relaxed, and I think gives it some support, as opposed to just mowing down on something, or multitasking at the same time.
Mm. I definitely feel the difference when so for example, when I'm eating at my dad's place, they have the
Mhm.
news on. And I
Ah,
feel the difference. I can't digest. I'm like, oh, I really don't want to eat much, because I feel the difference when
right?
I'm eating in that kind of environment versus when there's no TV, no news on, and maybe there's some beautiful conversation or some music. It's more relaxing.
Yes, absolutely. I completely relate to that. We don't, things, our digestion can just be out of whack as well, and it impacts everything cyclically. And along with that, I think, as you had mentioned, we can kind of fixate on our food a little bit, can't we? And it's a good indicator for me, like when I'm trying to tune into the flags and the whispers that my body says to me, is if I'm only looking for food as my joy, because we can fall into this category sometimes where we come home from work and maybe it's been a hard day and I'm really excited to eat this thing. If food becomes the joy in my life, I know that's a good indicator for me to start looking for other things to bring my joy. I think food should be like the frosting on the cake, but not the cake, of our joy, if you look at it that way. We want to make sure we're
Definitely.
finding pleasure and fun in the conversations we're having with others or the experiences that we're having, and of course food's a very satisfying thing, but we don't want it to be the joy.
Yeah. I think of it as sweetness. If you're looking for sweetness in food, you can find it,
Mm.
but it's not the right place to find it. You need to find sweetness in your
In
life, in
life.
your relationships. Just I guess the same thing, just a different way to look at it.
I love that way of looking at it, though. Yes, it's an indicator. We often, you know, want something and look for it in the wrong places, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I do, I've taken us on many different tangents, but let's come back and sort of summarize. Or is there anything that we've forgotten when you're looking at roadblocks to weight
Mm,
loss or to benefiting your adrenal health?
good question. The one other piece, there's so much information out there that's a bit much more tangible, right? People can Google or they can go and they can get, an even an adrenal nourishing way of eating. We can find all these things. So sometimes I like to really focus because there's these intangible pieces, much like that permission to prioritize yourself. I really think we need to be reminded, especially when it comes to weight loss, of our perspective. And if you sometimes a weight loss journey, if you're feeling like you have a lot of weight to lose, it can feel like you're climbing Everest. And I think that we can look at Everest and think, oh my goodness, this is a giant mountain. It's going to be so hard. It's going to be so cold. It's going to be so frustrating. Or we can look at it and think, wow, look at who I'm going to become along the way. Look at the views at each summit. Look at the people I'm going to connect with. Look at how strong I'm going to feel. And I think that sometimes we just need to re-energize ourselves with that perspective and surround yourself with people who have that perspective, because nothing happens overnight. We don't get where we are overnight, and we don't get back or to the next level overnight. So when it comes to particularly pertaining to weight loss, but to any challenge in your life, I think that perspective plays such a significant role. And the more you can do things that keep you in the positive perspective, because it's not going to be 100% of the time, but the more we can do things every day that bring us that joy or keep us in that mindset, the easier the journey is going to be and the more successful, I believe.
I love that you mentioned the people along the way because I
Yeah.
feel people can build you up or they can tear you down. And if you find
Mhm.
when you find your tribe, when you find the
Yeah.
right group of people, you all grow together. So it might
Hmm.
be, starting a new exercise and meeting some new people, or maybe you
Hmm.
currently have a walking group or a swimming group
Yes.
or a dog walking group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And if you don't, I think that's okay. It's such a one of the things I find so beautiful about these years, these menopause transition years, is I think it's an opportunity for us to really step into who we are. And when we step into who we are and stop, trying to do things for other people or people please, we end up really attracting we end up really, really attracting the right people. So I think that we don't have to worry so much about finding them, that they'll find us as we go.
Beautiful. So, Bria, how can women find you?
Oh, well, they could definitely find me and look me up at the Period Whisperer podcast on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere you get your podcasts. Or I'm on Instagram at Bria_period_whisperer.
Well, this has been a magical conversation. Thank you
Yes, as
so much
always.
for your time. Any final
Thank you.
thoughts?
No, I just want to thank you, Jennifer. I love your energy, how calm it is, how nourishing it feels. So I understand, I can see why you've been so successful and why you help so many women. And thank you for having me here. I hope more women remember to listen to what their bodies are saying and to give themselves permission to go after feeling amazing at any age.